Hello everyone, it's Ren here. Welcome to my room, guys. Welcome to my world. Hope you are all doing well and that you're excited about this, today's topic, which will propose to discuss what I consider to be two adversaries of INFJ growth, two enemies of INFJ fulfillment, two opponents of the ability for INFJ individuals to live meaningful, rich, purposeful lives. So if you're interested in that, of course, stick around for the video. I should mention that as I was discussing in my previous video, which was an episode of INFJ Confessions, where among other things I was talking about how these days I was deriving a lot of inspiration from my videos, from my current writing. What I'm going to talk about today is definitely also the product of reflections that I've been able to hone and elaborate further in the chapter I'm currently working on in the sequel to the Ecstatic Soul. So, by the way, this you can still get it if you haven't got it. This is the current must-read book on the INFJ personality if you want a deep understanding of the type. The sequel coming out this year. I can say that pretty confidently now because the writing is going well so far, so fingers crossed this will continue. You can also get my book, The Infinite Castle, which is a novel. It's a Kafka, Murakami, Dostoevsky tradition kind of novel, and the rumor has it the main character is an INFJ, so even from the point of view of understanding an INFJ in a fictional sense, unhealthy probably an INFJ in this sense, it's if I compare it to Kafka, there's a reason. Support the channel to get it as well. The links are all below, as well as my Patreon page. Free subscribers are great, but for my support to my Patreon, some paid subscriptions help as well. Thank you so much to all my supporters. So the enemies of all these INFJ good things that I talked about. So what are they? Well, I'm going to suggest to you that the ones I want to focus on, I'm going to give them each a name, of course, and then we're going to try to see. I'm going to justify, articulate why I think that they are enemies of rich, meaningful INFJ lives. Okay, so number one, I'm going to call it the instrumentalism or instrumental thinking or means ends thinking. Now, in my book, I also refer to this kind of thinking and this kind of worldview because it ultimately gets articulated in the worldview mechanism. It's the worldview that certainly has its metaphysical basis in the physical sciences, where it is valid, by the way. Not to say that mechanism is invalid necessarily. But I think the issue is it's spread throughout society, and in part, certainly a large part, because it benefits the general means ends thinking of capitalism, neoliberalism, expansions of markets, commodification of people and things, where the meaning of something is no longer understood as having, an independence in itself. So like a thing is not just something that is by virtue of just being, which is something that we could call like the sacredness of a thing, but rather it always has a point for the sake of something else. Okay, so if you think about it, in our contemporary era, there's very few entities that remain to be interpreted in more, along more of a sacred dimension, having value in and of itself, rather than for the sake of something else. So these conceptions might be a little bit abstract, but they're important to appreciate what instrumentalism is. You could argue that such things as the family, for a lot of people, the loved one, the romantic relationship. There's also a reason why one of my chapters in the current book is on love, but also the sense of the religious. Not all the time, by the way, because unfortunately instrumentalism has been consistently spreading throughout the conception of religious practice and penetrated into religious worldviews as well. Now, the other opponent is maybe a little bit more surprising, or might be more surprising to some people. Again, I'm choosing this other one because it is my argument that there is a kind of implicit collusion between instrumentalism and that other one. And I call that pop spirituality, okay? Now, by pop spirituality is kind of deliberately loose term meant to encompass a family of different activities, practices, beliefs. But generally speaking, it's everything that has to do with engaging in so-called spiritual activity or spiritual discussions, whether it may be paranormal or have more of a whiff of the philosophically metaphysical, whatever is, can be described as spiritual, but is very much conceived as a private activity, a private pastime that ultimately is very aestheticized and is never seriously considered as a potential contender to instrumentalism as a public form of truth. So the idea for pop spirituality, which obviously is very, very successful nowadays. Sometimes I refer to it in the book as woo-woo. It's the fact that a lot of people love engaging in that, but there's always implicitly in it the idea that, you can engage in it privately or with some friends. And then once you get outside of that, you can go back to good old mechanistic thinking. So it's privatized, so it doesn't really threaten the instrumental form of thinking in our societies, particularly Western societies. By the way, I should mention that the Western INFJ is the most threatened here. Instrumentalism is still supreme, and pop spirituality just carves out a niche that actually doesn't really resist, but in fact can be complicit with it, because there's lots of ways to have means and thinking about pop spirituality and marketing, thinking about marketing yourself as a pop spiritualist. So in a way, what I'm opposing to this, as by what you could call logical entailment, is a form of spirituality which would contribute to INFJ growth, contentment, and more than contentment, fulfillment and enrichment in life and life experiences, because this is ultimately what we're looking for, and what the book will be looking at. This is some of that stuff I've been talking about in previous videos, particularly when I was talking about my book. But the current book, is that the Ecstatic Soul is an analysis of the existential constitution or the consciousness of the INFJ, whereas the new book will be more about, okay, this is what we are like. We take this for granted. We don't come back to it too much. We take it for granted. How can we be happy in this world? In this world where the effacement of the truly spiritual is clear in the West and is through globalization spreading throughout the world. So one of the premises is that this is not good for INFJ fulfillment. It's a premise. You may question it, you may engage with it, you may challenge it. That's perfectly fine. We're here in a conversation. It's good to have the value of open-ended communication. This is usually how good insights come about. But, one of the premises of the book is spirituality as a genuine alternative to instrumental thinking is not getting stronger. And pop spirituality is a facade. It is certainly there because a need is felt in societies. And it's very obvious that this need for meaning, this need for purpose is very much felt, and it's not to say that everybody compensates for that by engaging in pop spirituality. Some people overcompensate by getting even more instrumental, by accumulating wealth, and they just perpetuate the cycle of hedonism and it's never satisfied. Some people decide to join causes that they think are transcendent. Some people still find in religion what they need. But if you like, this conception of the spiritual, the way that I'm thinking about it, it's not it's really not just something religious. Religion is actually one way in which the relationship to sacralizing existence as for its own sake rather than for the sake of something else, mechanistic / instrumental thinking. Of course, a religious belonging, religious perspective can facilitate that, because that's how you conceive God, and that's how you're supposed to conceive human beings in the image of God, and how, God conceives of human beings himself. But it need not, in actual practice, lead to, if you like, a spiritual perspective within religion. You can see in a lot of religious practices the growth of instrumental thinking. Now, so the way that I'm defining the spiritual, and why I think that it's important not just to certain kinds of INFJs that are spiritually inclined, but to all INFJs, is because I have this broader definition of the spiritual as something that's concerned with meaning, right? A spiritual worldview, in my understanding, in the understanding I develop in the book, is the understanding of what Max Weber, famous sociologists, called the enchanted world. A world that is full of meanings, rather than a mechanistic world that has no meaning but just a chain of cause and effects and its attendant means and thinking. I think INFJs need to have access to at least two different registers of perceiving reality. Reality seen in the mechanistic vocabulary, because again, this is not to say that it's always false, of course not. It's true in the physical sciences as far as we can tell, and certainly the kind of technological progress that it has facilitated has made our lives, materially speaking, a lot more well off. I mean, let's not be unreasonable here, and we have to state this. So the question is not so much, let's replace this and go back to the idea that the world is full of meaning and magical essences, but more so, can we have an alternative vocabulary for how we experience things that captures anything that cannot be captured by the language of mechanism, instrumentalism, means and thinking? I think pop spirituality is not a solution, because again, it's a private activity that stops being effective as soon as you leave the room. What we need is a renewed understanding of what the spiritual means, and I think in this universe, reflection on the place of the INFJ as a meaning-making being. This is something that it's a phrase that I'm using in my book, in my manuscript, and I'm certainly going to hold on to it because I think it's a really good phrase, and I'll have to explain a bit more on that, but maybe in a future video. The idea that quintessentially, the idea is more or less this: what is meaningful and has existence for its own sake is in some sense something that cannot be captured in, via recourse to transparent mechanistic reasoning. There's always a remainder that can't be captured. So it's not completely transparent. But the very function of NI, and the reason why NI struggles to articulate new insights, it's because what it perceives is not transparent. So by its very definition, the experience of INFJs in the realm of NI is an experience of the sacred understanding in the secular sense, you understand? And so it's an experience of the spiritual. I think it makes INFJs uniquely placed to articulate this possible alternative worldview, which does not need to, like I said, to be presented as replacing the mechanistic one. It's another description, but we need those descriptions. We need new words, we need new meanings, we need new metaphors, and I think INFJs can play a role in this. And it will benefit not just the world, but INFJs themselves. This big program might sound like it's a lot for INFJs, but if you want to know more about what they can do, wait until the book is released and get a copy. But I will discuss more of this in future videos anyway. So let me know in the comments what you think, and we'll be interacting there. Until then, take care, guys. Bye-bye.